Hi, and welcome to another episode of Twice as Hard. I am here today with Jacquie Abram. She is an international best-selling, award-winning author featured in Forbes, and I'm so happy to have her with me today. Hi, Jacquie.
Hi, thank you for that marvelous introduction. I am so happy to be here.
Thank you so much. And of course, I'm Janelle Benjamin, founder and CEO of All Things Equitable. Just really happy to bring this series Twice as Hard to you, my viewers. Don't forget to click the like and subscribe button below as we enter into the conversation. So Jacquie, tell me a little bit about Hush Money. It is, it's working its magic. People are buying it like hotcakes. Tell me a little bit about the premise of the story and what inspired the writing.
Wonderful. So, just once again, I am the author of Hush Money, How One Woman Proved Systemic Racism in Her Workplace and Kept Her Job. And Janelle, as you mentioned, it is a best-selling, award-winning book. It is spreading around the globe right now, being read in Canada, United Kingdom, New Zealand, France, Germany, Italy, Finland, Switzerland, Australia, in addition to the United States. And the reason it's spreading is because it does something a little different than what you traditionally see in a lot of the books, the movies, and the TV shows that focus on racism. And so, we'll talk a little bit about that. But let me just give you a little bit of background information on me. Janelle, I don't know if you've ever, heard a little bit about me, but one thing that most people have figured out by now, through the various interviews that I've done, is that I'm actually not a writer. I have a background in finance. Okay. I'm a number cruncher. Writing is not something I ever planned to do. I ever wanted to do. I ever dreamed about doing. I actually had a lucrative career in higher education that I was exceptional at. Okay. Let me just put emphasis on that. I was good at my job, Janelle. It paid me six figures, which was essential because, my income was the only income as a single parent of two children.
Okay.
And, it paid me enough money to not only pay my bills comfortably, but to provide for my family comfortably. And by any measure, Janelle, it should have been a successful career, okay? But it wasn't. And the reason it wasn't is because as I was building my career in higher education, which spanned nearly 2 decades, so you're talking almost 20 years, I kept finding myself becoming the repeated victim of racism in the workplace. And Janelle, it wasn't the kind, like I said, that you see in a lot of the books and the movies and TV shows that tend to focus on, racism from decades ago, during a time when it was more overt. You could easily spot it. You could point right at it and say, what I'm experiencing is racism. You could easily spot it. It was overt. That's not what I dealt with in my career. Yes. That's not what my daughters dealt with in their careers. And unfortunately, that's not what a lot of us are dealing with in our careers today.
Yeah, I've also experienced some of those covert ways that, the workplace can harm us. And so why don't you tell me a little bit more about that and what exactly happened in your case?
So, as you mentioned, modern day racism has morphed into this hidden way of attacking Black people and people of color where they hurt, but doing it in such a way that it is hidden, it is covert, and it's much, much harder to prove. Okay.
That's right.
So in my case, as I was building my career, and working in environments that were horrific, to say the least, okay?
Okay.
I suffered a lot of racial trauma. And, people don't like to talk about racial trauma. I have nothing against diversity, equity, and inclusion trainings because I know they're well-intentioned.
Right.
However, when you are experiencing racism in the workplace, okay, when you clock out at the end of the day, that racism impact on you doesn't clock out with you. You carry it with you and it becomes part of you, and you internalize it, and it results in trauma. And unfortunately, diversity, equity, and inclusion trainings, have been around for decades. But if you notice, we continue to experience racism. And it's because a lot of the trainings are missing that crucial component of exposing the trauma, the racial trauma that's associated with racism. So why is that important, Janelle? It's important because when you are the target of racism in the workplace, one of the things that happens is they dehumanize you. You are a victim who is being abused, but you are dehumanized, and the organization looks at you not as a victim, but more as a villain. Okay? Because you're sticking up for yourself. You're trying to get justice and equity for yourself. And so without that racial trauma component, you stay dehumanized.
So tell me a little bit about the specific experiences. What was the environment in the workplace that you're talking about looking like?
So what I will do is I will give you an example. You know that my book is inspired by true events. There is a real person behind the horrific events that happened to Ebony in my book, Hush Money. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab an example directly from my book, and I'm going to tell you and show you how racism has morphed into this more covert aspect, okay?
Okay, sure.
So my book takes place in higher education in a for-profit college, okay? So as you know, with any college system, you're going to have campuses. And you are going to have multiple campuses in multiple locations. And in each of those campuses, you're going to have duplicate job titles. So you may have a director of student finance, a director of admissions. You may have a receptionist at each campus. So you're going to have multiple positions. Now, if you hire a director of student finance, that is a white person, and you pay that white person $55,000 a year, and you hire a Black person to also be a director of student finance to do the same job, right? But you pay this person over here $20,000 less than you pay the white person. Well, that's an example of, it could be either overt and covert, because it's only covert if this person over here doesn't know that they're being paid $20,000 less than this person over here, right? But when you look at payroll records, it's very easy to prove, okay, this person's obviously making $20,000 more than this person. So employers have gotten really smart, and they know that if I underpay this person, that can easily be proved, through payroll records. So they have figured out a new way to do their racism, but in a way that you can't prove it. So same example, You're working at a college, you hire two people, a white person and a Black person, to be the director of student finance. Well, because you, the employer, know that if I underpay this person by too much, they can easily prove that, we're going to give this person a comparable salary. So now the salaries are getting closer and closer aligned. Here's where they get you. We're going to hire you both, but for the white person, we're going to provide you with all the information that you need to be successful in your new job. We're going to give you all the right tools. We're going to give you all the right resources. We're going to have mentorship and connections in place for you. And we're going to essentially set you up with a training that is so spectacular that you are guaranteed to be successful in this new job that you've been hired to do out of the gate. Make sense?
Yeah.
Now, the same person that trains the white person for this job has to train the Black person to do the same job, but they withhold information that is vital to that person's success.
Right.
And in my case, in my position, not only did they withhold information, but they intentionally give you the wrong information so that you make mistakes. Okay.
Okay. You're pointing out some of the ways that,
yes,
the concept of having to work twice as hard can present itself in a real situation.
But it doesn't stop there, because not only are they giving you limited information on your job and what you need to be successful in that, they're limiting your tools. Right. They're limiting your resources. There's no mentorship available for you, no connections available for you. And again, because they're providing a training that is subpar and intentionally making it more difficult for you to do that job, you are set up for failure right out of the gate. And guess what happens? You start making mistakes because you've been trained and conditioned to make those mistakes. Right. And they're documenting the mistakes as you're making them, the mistakes that they have trained you to make. And at the end of your probation period, they're using that documentation of the mistakes that you were trained to make to justify letting you go. Right. Okay. Now you are dumbfounded because you're wondering, how on earth am I making all these mistakes? I have done everything that I was told to do. But you cannot prove it. It's almost impossible to prove that they set you up to fail. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And so that's just seen this play out. Yes. This exact thing play out in a situation where, a Black staff member that I was supervising, when I went off of maternity leave, she expressed how this kind of targeted performance management system kind of kicked in to luckily when I came back, she found another position elsewhere, but they were setting her up, started to paper her file and do all of the things to kind of put the writing on the wall and oust her from her position. And it happens to so many of our people and people of color. We lose our jobs not really knowing what happened. And because it's so hard to prove that this person didn't train you properly, most people can't prove it. And so they end up losing. Yeah. Now that's just one example. Let me give you another example right out of my career. Okay. Now, Janelle, I like to passionately refer to this as the Black workhorse. Okay. Okay. All right. So you are a Black person. You've been hired for a job at this new company, right? Again, companies have gotten smart and they know you can prove it if they underpay you too much. So that pay gap is getting less and less, right? Okay. But here's how they get you. Okay, Black person, we're going to hire you for this job. We're going to pay you a decent wage because we don't want anybody saying that we're discriminating. So we're going to pay you a decent salary. Okay. Here's your job description, okay? I want you to pay particularly close attention to that last bullet that says you're going to do all these duties and all other duties as assigned. Their favorite line. Okay. So now you, the Black person, you get hired to be the director of student finance. But as the months go by, you're noticing that in addition to your job, you now have this person's job added to your plate, these extra duties added to your plate, these extra duties. And before you know it, you are working 80, 90 hours a week to do the same job
that this white person over here is doing, but at the end of their shift, they're done. They're able to clock out. And you, because your workload is now so heavy with all these extra duties that have been added to your plate, you know, you're working 70, 80 hours a week trying to keep up with your workload, but you're only getting paid for one job.
Right.
But you're doing the job of 2, 3, sometimes even 4 people.
And I've seen that play out a lot. And we talked about that on another episode with Janice Gassam. She talked about how Black women can be seen in the office late at night after hours, doing the work precisely because, of this 2 things, this notion that we have internally that we need to work twice as hard in order to move up, right? And number 2, precisely because more is put upon us in the workplace.
And we think, if I could just add to that, we're thinking that as they're giving us all of these extra duties, that by doing these extra duties, it's going to make us more promotable. It's going to make us more valuable. So as they're bringing these things to us, we're taking them on, believing that this is what we need to do. As you said, work twice as hard to climb that corporate ladder.
So what are we going to say to the viewer? I'm sure there's going to be the skeptic out there that says, oh, okay, there's all this conspiracy to treat Black people differently, to be unfair. This isn't the civil rights era anymore, and we've moved past that. Systemically, organizations care about diversity and inclusion. They're trying to be the inclusive leaders and close the pay gaps, and still, here we go. Black women are complaining about the things that we're putting in place. But I hear what you're saying in terms of the system is one piece, but there's individual actors within a system that are not necessarily addressed by certain inclusion initiatives that we have, right? Unless you're measuring the degree of competency, which I do, the degree to which a leader is moving from, racist to potentially anti-racist, then there's no stopping, people from intentionally acting out, scenarios that cause harm on us.
So let me just talk to you a little bit about what I went through in my career. Okay. Everyone, no matter what color they are, no matter what their background, no matter, where they come from, everyone has biases. Okay.
Absolutely.
Everyone has certain biases. So that is a given. Everybody. The challenge that I ran into in my career, and that a lot of us are dealing with right now, I actually liken what I'm about to describe to you to what happened with George Floyd, honestly, okay?
Okay.
So let me just tell you why I say that. And let me paint a picture for you. Okay. So George Floyd was brutally murdered in his community by a racist police officer, Derek Chauvin, right?
Of course.
Okay, but here's the thing, Janelle. When Derek Chauvin had his knee on George's neck and took his last breath from him, killing him, he was the one who actually carried out the act of killing George. But he had help. There were 3 other people on the scene.
Right.
There was one police officer who was standing up, watching. He's standing there, and he has created a barrier of protection between him, between Derek Chauvin, as he's killing George, and the allies. There are allies over here who are watching. They're observing as Derek kills George. But because of this police officer in the middle that they're afraid of because of his position of authority and influence and power, they stood on the sidewalk, and all they could do was watch in horror as Derek killed George. Right. But they wanted to help. They knew it was wrong. They saw what was happening. They wanted to help, but they were afraid of the power and the influence that this cop standing between Derek and them had. Okay. But there were two other police officers there. There was one who was physically holding George's legs down.
Mm-hmm.
There was another police officer who had his knee in George's back. And then there's Derek Chauvin with his knee on his neck. So there are a total of 3 people with their body weight on him, rendering him completely powerless and helpless to defend himself and respond in that situation. Now, why is this important? Okay. Of the 4 police officers that were there on that scene, Derek Chauvin was the leader. He was the most senior police officer who had the power and the influence. So when he led, the other police officers followed, right?
Oh, yeah. Yes, we do know that.
Mm-hmm. And they killed him in his community. Now, you take that situation where racists kill us in our community and you move it to the workplace.
Mm-hmm.
You are a Black person or a person of color. You are working in your job, okay? You may have a little bias going on over here. You may have a racist coworker over here that doesn't like you. But when a person in that organization who is in a senior position,
Mm-hmm.
they are a person of power and influence, just like Derek Chauvin was.
Right.
When they notice you and they target you,
Mm-hmm.
they are the ones carrying the act of killing your career, just like they killed George in his community. But guess what? They always have help.
Yes,
Okay?
they do.
They always have help because of their position of power and influence.
Mm-hmm.
They inspire others in the organization to conspire with them.
Mm-hmm.
And before you know it, you have multiple people, and one of those people aiding and abetting this racist as he's killing your career.
Mm-hmm.
In my case, in the case of my daughters, in the case of so many other people, works in HR.
Yeah.
Okay. You know, you get straight talk with me, no sugar
Me
added, no
too.
chaser.
Me too.
And I'm telling you, one of those people helping this racist kill my career works in HR.
Mm-hmm. There's always someone in HR.
Yes.
Right. And then the CEO has to sign off on whatever's happening as well.
Well, yes. And so now you're being targeted by people. So you've got more than one person,
right,
who are conspiring against you, the Black person or the person of color.
Mm-hmm.
And before you know it, your career is being derailed and you are finding yourself facing 3 impossible choices.
Take a moment if you need, Jacquie. I want to share while you're, just compose yourself, take a moment, because while you gather yourself, I just want to share that I also, as you're talking, I have traumas, internalized traumas, post-traumatic work syndrome or whatever it's called. And I'm triggered as well. I'm envisioning a variety of workplaces, people conspiring to push me out, to take food out of my children's mouths.
Exactly.
And so I know intimately what you're talking about, but yes. I do want the viewers to get a greater understanding, because a lot of people will say, well, this happens with every termination, right? No matter what color you are. White people go through, these experiences and get terminated just the same. And so part of what I want to do through this series is highlight the experiences of Black women, talk about the ways in which, working twice as hard over the course of our life does not necessarily serve us when we get into the workplace, and then dispel those myths, that if we're twice as good and we have all the qualifications that we can stay and belong. And diversity and inclusion work, a lot of it right now is about this culture of inclusion and belonging that just doesn't happen for us, right? No. We can never relax in a workplace. Personally, I'm not going to, set up, family photos on the wall and,
right.
My rollable briefcase is always on hand, I say, because I don't know when they're going to say, can you meet us in HR? It's your last day. So we can't relax in the workplace.
we are constantly operating in a state of hypervigilance. And you are right, we don't get comfortable, but we are also held. So I've given you 2 examples of covert racism. Let me just tell you about another example of covert racism.
Okay.
As a Black person, okay, we are held to different standards than our white counterparts. Okay, we could be doing the exact same thing that a white person is doing, you know, that maybe, and let's just use an example of someone who's maybe not a top performer like I was, who maybe is just doing their job at an average level, or may not be the best worker. But there are 5 other people who are also not the best workers who happen to be white. So these white people that are not also working at their top level, they're just average or a little bit below average, you know, they're doing the same thing I'm doing, but out of the 6 people, I'm the one that gets in trouble.
Right.
I'm the one that's under scrutiny. I'm the one that's being written up. I'm the one that's being watched.
How do you explain that, Jackie, for those who you know, may not live in this skin on a daily basis? How do you explain that Black women who are top performing are the ones being pushed out of these workplaces?
Well, it goes back to the idea, the concept that I described with, you know, my analogy using George Floyd. You know, if someone in the organization who happens to be racist notices you and targets you, well, they have the power, the influence, and the authority to put actions behind that bias. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So because of their power, they can actually set in motion actions, behaviors, and conspiracies to actually get you out of that position. You know, and that's where we have to make we have to differentiate. You know, we're not talking about, you know, the coworker that works in the desk next to me that doesn't like me,
right.
You know, because he doesn't have the power and the influence to do me harm.
Right.
It's the person in the organization in a top position who is racist. Okay. And no matter how many diversity, equity, and inclusion trainings you have, if you have someone in a leadership position on your staff who fundamentally believes at their core that what they are doing is okay, and you do not address them or check them, then they have the power that they need to derail you.
Absolutely.
So what organizations who are really interested in true, authentic environments that are inclusive, what they really need to do is they need to start learning how to recognize the covert aspects of racism. Because if you notice with all the diversity and equity and inclusion trainings, the examples that they give are a small snippet of something overt that you could easily tell is racism.
Right.
And as I've already explained, that's not what we're dealing with.
Right.
So these DEI trainings need to evolve to address what we're dealing with in modern day, which is covert.
Right.
It's
the unconscious bias, the microaggressions, right? The ways in which power and oppression work. I don't think that, you know, a lot of trainings don't go into that. Mine do, but you know, you're absolutely right. There's a lot of them, you know, I've attended some trainings from other organizational leaders that are just lousy. Like I'm left like, are you kidding me? They're talking about psychological safety, but they didn't even go into like real examples that, you know, cause us to like vent in anguish on our lunch break with a coworker because, you know, what's about to happen to you, you know what they're doing to you, and we're just in absolute anguish. And I don't think that some of these trainers, when they're talking about psychological safety, they haven't lived the real issues that cause it to be in jeopardy.
That's what makes this book so powerful. So let me just tell you a little bit about this book and how organizations are using it.
Okay.
So I wrote this book from a place of pain after my career in higher education was killed by racists. And I found myself contemplating homicide because Janelle, I wanted to kill my boss. And I'm not saying that to be funny. If I could have found a way, I was so beyond messed up in the head.
Right.
Behind these people targeting me and taking away my ability to provide for my two girls. And so because of the trauma that I was suffering, I wanted to kill my boss.
That's a human response. I think I've had that same response, if I'm being honest, for sure.
Yes,
for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But the flip side of that is, after 20 years of trying to make it as a Black woman in corporate America, getting so far up that ladder and, thinking you finally have a chance to breathe. And then someone in the organization, maybe they weren't there when you started, but they were hired on and now they're there and they notice you and they start pulling that rug from under you.
Right.
You and that ladder that you're on come crashing down.
Absolutely.
So in my case, by the fourth and fifth time that this kept happening to me, okay, I actually thought I was going crazy because I thought there was something wrong with me, that there was something that I was doing that was causing these people to target me the way that they were. And I was so messed up. Like I said, I actually wanted to kill myself. And I was actually standing on the edge of the ocean at a place called Salt Creek Beach in California. And I was actually going to kill myself that day. But thankfully, God intervened, because as I was standing on the edge of the water, just trying to figure out how I was going to do this, my cell phone rang. And my youngest daughter, like I said, I have two girls. My youngest daughter called me. So, I step out of myself long enough to answer the phone. And when I answer it, she just starts crying and hysterically pouring her heart out to me. And I said, what's wrong? And she says, Mom, they're after me. These people are after me. I'm about to lose my job. And then she starts telling me these horrific things that the people on her job were doing to her. And they had set her up and she was about to lose her job. And she's also a single mom. And so when I realized that racists were doing to my youngest daughter the same thing that was being done to me, I don't know if you have children.
I do.
Okay. So, it's one thing if you mess with me. Yeah. But if you touch my kids, if you target my kids, if you go after my kids in any way, shape, or form, you've got a serious problem on your hands. And that was enough to get me out of myself to focus on my daughter. And so I packed up that day and I came back to Colorado and I helped my daughter deal with her situation at work. Wow. And then I talked to my other daughter and I found out from her that the same thing was going on with her. So we decided, once we realized, okay, we're not crazy, to talk to other people in our family, realizing that, the people in our family, our friends, and people, strangers in the community that I started talking to, we were going through the same thing. We were all experiencing the same thing. And so at that point, we decided to take the pain that we were feeling and to tell one of the stories that we knew. Because of all the stories that we heard, there was a woman who went through the same thing. but she figured out the right way to fight back, to set her employer up the way that they were setting her up, to actually turn the tables on her employer, survive the battle,
Right.
prove what she was experiencing, and keep her job. And so she went through pure hell. I'm not going to lie. For 5 years, they put her through hell. But she came up with a strategy that was actually very successful and wanted to tell the world not only what happened to her, but how she successfully fought it back. So we wrote Hush Money, this book right here. And like I told you, we're not writers. I'm a number cruncher. My kids are not writers, but we wrote a book. But here's the thing, we couldn't get a publisher. Okay, publishers said, nobody wants to hear about your experiences with racism in the workplace. And so I thought, okay, well, publishers think nobody wants to hear about this. We'll do it ourselves. I found somebody for $22 to make me this book cover. And we uploaded it to Amazon. And now here we are 7 months later after we sold this book from the trunk of my car because we didn't know what to do with it. Here we are, international bestsellers, award winners, recipients of the gold medal for social issues novels, you know, and on Amazon's bestseller list, #1 on Goodreads for best eye-opening African-American women's fiction. You know, we have nearly 200 reviews on Amazon with a 5-star rating. And people, Black people and people of color are calling this book their roadmap, their survival guide. But
so
you know what's interesting?
Go pick it up, that's for sure.
But you know what's interesting? White people, 50% of the people who are buying this book are white. And the reviews from the white people are amazing. What they're saying is that, you know, we know racism is wrong. We want to help, but Black people don't want our help. You know, they're telling us, you don't get us. You don't understand us. You've never experienced racism. Get out of here. So what my book does for the white person who wants to help, who wants to be an ally, who wants to help us abolish racism, but people are saying, you don't get it. You don't understand us. Well, it puts you into the shoes of a racial discrimination victim, and you get to follow her, Ebony, through her 5-year journey working in this company. You get to see all the mistakes that she made. You get to see all of the horrific experiences and events she endured, the racial traumas she suffered. But then you get to see what happens when she starts learning from her mistakes and starts to get things right. And it's all laid out in vivid detail. And so white people, when they finish reading Hush Money, their ideas about what we experience working while Black are changed. Their eyes are opened.
That's fantastic. I'm so glad to, you know, just have you on this show sharing such a powerful piece of writing, a personal piece of writing with my audience. I think, and I know, because I've read it myself, how, you know, transformative and inspiring the story is, but I can actually know, you know, that it would be impactful for white people too, who, like you said, they're holding these positions of power within organizations, and teach them something about how power can be used and wielded, you know,
yes,
in these harmful and hurtful ways. And so I thank you, Jacquie, for, you know, just sharing a little bit about yourself and your story with us. A very, very deep and personal story, brought you to tears, and I'm sure brought a lot of viewers to tears along with you. And I'm just so thankful for you writing that piece, sharing your story, and the ways in which you've just been working twice as hard ever since to fight racism and discrimination and teach people along the way. So can you tell us a little bit about just the next things on the horizon for you? I know there's a sequel to the first book.
Yes. Yes.
Tell us a little bit about that.
So one more time, this book is Hush Money, How One Woman Proved Systemic Racism in Her Workplace and Kept Her Job. You can get this book from Amazon. You can also order autographed books directly from me on LinkedIn. But here's the thing. Even though Ebony, who is the main protagonist in my book, even though she proved systemic racism and kept her job, her battles with racism did not end there. So we have the sequel to the book, which is Hush Money, The Cost of Being Black in Corporate America. The sequel was just released about a week and a half ago, and it picks up literally where book one left off to tell the rest of this riveting, provocative, captivating story.
Okay.
And this book is also available on Amazon. You can also message me directly on LinkedIn. I'm active on several different platforms, but I am most active on LinkedIn. You are guaranteed to reach me and get a response from me if you contact me on LinkedIn.
Perfect. So that's Jacquie Abram. That's Jacquie, Jacquie, Abram, Abram on LinkedIn. You can also reach me, Janelle Benjamin, on LinkedIn or at allthingsequitable.ca. Thank you so much for watching this episode. Jacquie, thank you so much for being with me today.
Thank you.
Don't forget to hit the like, subscribe button below, share this video, let everybody know about Hush Money, and don't forget to go out and buy your copy. It will change your life. Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye.